Today's story is one of those you won't believe is real. The kind that starts with rain, a stranger and a small act of kindness, and ends with a luxury car, betrayal and justice. Stay with me, because this one might change how you look at people forever. Subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment down below. For every new subscriber, I'll donate $1 to a local charity. Let's turn stories into action. The rain had been falling non-stop since noon. That cold kind of rain that seeps through your jacket and sits on your shoulders like weight. Daryl's 12-hour shift at the warehouse had ended half an hour ago, but his body was still buzzing with fatigue. His steel-toe boots were soaked, and his back ached from lifting crates that didn't even have labels anymore. He stopped at a cheap corner supermarket on 9th Street. The kind with flickering fluorescent lights and a faint smell of bleach mixed with something fried. He needed bread. Just bread. He dug into his damp pocket, counted 3 crumpled dollar bills, and headed toward the entrance. That's when he saw her. She was small, old, white hair tucked under a faded beige hat, hands gripping a shopping cart with a busted wheel that veered sideways every few steps. Her coat was soaked through, and the groceries inside the cart, cans, boxed cereal, maybe a bag of apples, were threatening to spill out. People passed her like she wasn't even there. One guy in a business suit actually bumped her shoulder, muttered something under his breath, and kept walking. She flinched but said nothing. Daryl hesitated. He could just go in, get his bread, get out. It wasn't his business. But something about her, maybe the way she kept blinking against the rain, or how her lips trembled without saying a word, made him move. He walked up slowly, hands visible, not wanting to scare her. "You okay, ma'am?" She looked up at him like she hadn't heard that question in years. Her eyes were glassy blue, wet from the rain, or maybe something else. "This thing's broken," she said softly, patting the cart. "And I think I dropped one of my bags." One of the small plastic bags had indeed fallen and split, with 2 cans rolling toward the gutter. Daryl crouched down, picked them up, placed them back. "Let me help you inside," he said. She didn't protest. Her fingers, thin and cold, gripped his forearm for balance as they moved toward a bench just inside the store's covered entry. He pulled the cart beside her and made sure it stayed upright. "You're the first one who's noticed me today," she whispered as she sat down. Her voice shook slightly, but not from the cold. Daryl managed to smile. "I notice people," he said. "Always have." He was about to turn and go when a loud voice cut through the air behind him. "Hey, you." A security guard, mid-40s, white, buzz cut, hands on his belt, stepped toward them. "She bothering you, ma'am?" he asked. "No. No," she said quickly. "He helped me." The guard didn't even look at her. He stared right at Daryl. "We've had complaints. You can't hang around here. You're scaring customers." Daryl blinked, dumbfounded. He looked down at himself. Dark hoodie, work pants, hands still damp from the rain. I don't care. Move along." He looked back at the old woman. She opened her mouth, but he gently raised a hand. "It's okay," he said. "I was leaving anyway." And then he stepped back into the rain. The bread could wait, or not. Honestly, at that moment, he didn't care anymore. He walked away, soaked to the skin, wondering what it was exactly that people saw when they looked at him. He didn't know her name, didn't even think to ask. But she remembered his face.
The next morning, the sky was clear, but Daryl's mood was anything but. His back still ached from the previous shift, and his boots hadn't dried overnight. He had managed to grab a few hours of broken sleep, haunted by the memory of that soaked old woman, and the look the security guard gave him. The look that said, "You don't belong here." He clocked in at the warehouse just before 7 a.m., trying to keep his head down. His supervisor, Mike, barely nodded at him. Usually they exchanged some kind of grunt or tired smile, but today, nothing. Cold eyes, tight lips. It was around 10 a.m., When the commotion started, 2 squad cars pulled up outside the warehouse gates. Flashing lights. A few workers stopped stacking boxes and leaned toward the open loading bay door to get a better look. A couple guys whistled low. "What now, man?" one muttered. A minute later, 2 officers walked in. They were calm, firm, and walked straight up to the foreman. Darrell saw Mike gesture toward him. Then the officers turned. "Darrell Green?" one of them asked. "Yeah," he replied slowly. "Is something wrong?" "We got a report," the officer said. "There was an incident outside a supermarket last night. A woman felt threatened. Said you acted aggressive." Darrell felt something drop inside him. "What?" "No, I helped her. Her cart broke, she was in the rain." "Sir, we just need to ask a few questions." They didn't cuff him, didn't raise their voices, but they let him out of the warehouse like he was a thief. Like everyone inside hadn't just seen him sweating through pallets of boxed merchandise for weeks. He could feel every eye on his back. A couple whispers, a few laughs. They sat him down at the station. Asked about the store, the old woman. What happened? He told them the whole thing about the bag, the cart, the bench. "Did you touch her?" one officer asked. "I helped her sit." "That's it. Was she distressed?" "She was wet. Cold. Alone. I helped her. Then your security buddy told me to leave." The officers exchanged a look. One of them leaned back and sighed. "All right, we've reviewed part of the camera footage. You didn't do anything wrong." The report came from a bystander. "Misunderstanding, probably. You're free to go." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just "you're free to go." Darrell walked out into the bright sunlight, feeling dirtier than when he'd been dragged in. He took the bus back to the warehouse, but by the time he got there, Mike had already sent someone else to cover his shift. No overtime, no pay for the hours. Missed, no conversation. And then Mike called him into the office later that afternoon. "Look, Darrell, I don't know what that was about, but we can't have cops showing up at the gate like that. Corporate gets twitchy. Gotta think about reputation." "I didn't do anything," Darrell replied. "I helped someone. I'm just saying, you're on thin ice right now. Your next evaluation's coming up. Don't give them a reason." And just like that, the air around Darrell thickened. The invisible weight of suspicion was now strapped to his shoulders, at work, on the bus, at the store. It didn't matter that the woman didn't complain. It didn't matter that he helped. That night, he sat in his one-bedroom apartment, staring at the envelope on the table. Final notice, unpaid electricity. If it wasn't paid in 3 days, the lights would be gone. The fridge would stop humming. The heat would go with it. He looked around at the cracked linoleum floor, the flickering ceiling light, the small stove that barely worked. He was 34 and still renting month to month, still living off leftovers and factory work. So this is what kindness gets you, he thought. Cold food. Cold looks, no lights. He hadn't seen the old woman since. Maybe she was gone. Maybe she didn't even remember him. But someone else had. Someone watching. Someone who would come looking soon and change everything. A week had passed. 7 gray, wet days since Darrell had last seen the woman outside the supermarket. Nothing had changed. Not at the warehouse, not in his bank account, not in the way people looked at him. The stares were still there. Just a little quieter now. He kept his head down, said less, and did his job like a ghost. That evening, the rain was back. Sharp, cold needles falling sideways in gusts of wind. Darrell's hood was up, shoulders hunched, grocery bags swinging from one calloused hand. A can of beans, a loaf of bread, and a pack of instant noodles. That was all he could afford with what was left after rent. As he turned onto his street, he noticed it immediately. There was a car parked in front of his building. Not just any car. A jet-black Lexus LS, the kind that moved like a whisper and cost more than his annual salary. Its sleek surface gleamed even under the gray sky, rain beads rolling down the hood like it had just left the showroom. It didn't belong here. Not among the cracked sidewalks and flickering street lamps of his worn-out neighborhood. Darrell slowed his pace. No one in his building owned a car like that. No one even knew someone who did. It wasn't running. It just sat there, like it had been waiting. And then he saw the envelope. White. Crisp. Perfectly dry despite the rain. It lay right in the center of the hood, weighed down by a single silver key. His name was written across the front in elegant looping script, Darrell Green. He looked around. The street was empty except for a stray cat darting under a dumpster. No one on the sidewalks. No footsteps. Just the steady drum of rain on pavement. He stepped closer, cautious, almost expecting someone to jump out from behind the bushes. But nothing moved. He reached out, picked up the envelope, and then the key. It was a car key. Lexus logo, real. His hands shook a little as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, folded in half. Typed. Clean. At the top, one sentence in bold, "You saved my dignity. Now I want to save your life." Below that, a signature, Geraldine Brooks. He stood there for a moment, completely still. Rain hit his jacket. His breath came out shaky. Geraldine Brooks. He didn't know anyone by that name. Not personally. But the woman. The old woman outside the supermarket. She never gave him her name. Could it be? He looked back at the car, then again at the letter. There were no other instructions, no explanation. Just the key. And a message that made no sense, but at the same time, made everything fall into place. He opened the door. It wasn't locked. The smell inside was brand new. Leather, clean upholstery, untouched dashboard. A manila folder sat on the passenger seat. He picked it up and opened it. Inside, a deed to a small apartment on the west side of the city, in his name. A bank statement showing a new account, balance 78, a second envelope, labeled simply, "Start over." He sat down in the driver's seat, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or run. All his life, Darrell had been given less attention, less credit, less opportunity, and now, out of nowhere no one had ever done something for him. Not like this, not with no strings attached, not with this kind of power. He sat in that car, for almost 20 minutes, the engine off, the key in his hand. Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside, something began to thaw. Geraldine Brooks, whoever she was, she had seen him, truly seen him, not as a threat, not as a problem, but as a human being. And now, without ever asking for anything back, she had done what no one else had ever done. She gave him a future. The next morning, Darrell barely slept. His thoughts were a tangle of disbelief, suspicion, and a quiet, growing hope. He held the letter in his hands for hours, before finally pulling out the address from the second envelope. There it was, handwritten in gold ink. An address in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. A place he'd only ever passed by on the bus, watching through the window like a tourist. He ironed his cleanest shirt. The collar was frayed, and the sleeves a little short, but it was the best he had. He cleaned his shoes with an old rag, then stared at himself in the mirror, unsure who was looking back. He didn't feel like the man who belonged to a Lexus, or to a mysterious envelope, promising a new life, but the address was real. The key was real, and something inside him whispered, "Go." The drive took 30 minutes, but it felt like another world. Tree-lined streets, with gates taller than houses. Lawns trimmed with geometric precision. Darrell's heart pounded as he turned into the cul-de-sac. At the end of the street stood a white villa, wrapped in ivy and roses, with a circular driveway made of cobblestone, the kind of place people in his neighborhood only saw in magazines. He parked the Lexus like it was someone else's. Every step toward the villa felt heavier than the last. Before he could even raise a hand to knock, the door opened. She was standing there, the same woman from the supermarket. Only now, her clothes were immaculate. A soft ivory shawl rested on her shoulders, her silver hair was styled neatly, and yet she looked smaller than he remembered. Frail, but graceful. She smiled. "Come in, Daryl. I've been waiting for you." He stepped inside. The villa smelled like roses and fresh-baked bread. A warm light filled the space, quiet and welcoming. They sat in a sunroom with tall windows and a view of the garden. Birds chirped outside. A small tea set sat between them, untouched. Geraldine folded her hands in her lap. "My husband Thomas died last year. Cancer. He was the one who ran things, the restaurants, the foundation, the decisions. After he passed, everyone started treating me like I was just furniture. There, but not really there. You know?" Daryl nodded. He knew that feeling too well. She continued. "That day at the supermarket, I wasn't just struggling with the cart. I was testing something, or maybe hoping someone still sees people like me, hoping I'm not invisible. You stopped. You didn't have to. And you didn't look at me like I was a burden. You looked at me like I mattered." She paused. That saved something in me. Then she reached for a folder sitting beside her. "This is for you," she said. "I don't want to just give you a car. I want to give you a purpose, if you want it." She opened the folder. "I run a foundation. We support families in food deserts, provide scholarships, mental health services, and housing assistance. We've got the money, but we need people who understand what hardship really feels like. People who care for the right reasons. I want you to be one of our program coordinators. Full-time. Benefits. Starting salary, $95,000 a year. And you'd have an office here, if you want. Or we can move you closer to where the work is." Daryl didn't say anything. He couldn't. His throat tightened. Geraldine leaned in. "You've been overlooked, haven't you? All your life." "Me too lately. Let's change that. Together." The folder was thick. Paperwork. A job offer. Photos of community programs. Faces of people smiling beside food boxes. And housing vouchers. The kind of work that meant something. The kind of work he thought only other people got to do. His voice finally returned. Low and shaky. "Why me?" She smiled again. Softer this time. "Because you didn't wait for a reward. You just helped." In that moment, surrounded by sunlight and roses, something shifted in Daryl's chest. All the years of being invisible, dismissed, underestimated. They didn't disappear, but they felt lighter. He reached for the folder. "I'll do it," he said. Geraldine nodded. "Good. Let's get to work." At first, everything moved like a dream. Daryl settled into his new role with a kind of quiet urgency. Every morning, he arrived at the foundation early, reviewing community proposals, talking with families, listening more than he spoke. People trusted him. Not because of his title, but because he didn't pretend to be above them. He was them. Geraldine watched him with pride. She introduced him to staff, donors, even invited him to sit in on strategic meetings. Her presence by his side wasn't just symbolic, it was protective. As if she knew the storm was coming, and it did. It started subtly. Whispered questions in the hallway, cold glances during staff meetings, emails that were suddenly left unanswered. But the real blow came during a dinner Geraldine hosted at her villa, a gathering for family and board members. Daryl had been asked to attend. He wore a dark jacket, polished his shoes again. He hoped to make a good impression. What he walked into, though, was an ambush. Geraldine's son, Michael, greeted him with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So you're the man driving my mother's Lexus."
Darrell extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, sir. I'm Darrell." Michael cut him off. "We know who you are." Later that night, at the dinner table, surrounded by crystal glasses and linen napkins, Michael raised his voice just enough to draw attention. "I've seen your type before. You find a lonely old woman, make her feel special, and suddenly she's giving away her fortune." Geraldine stiffened. "That's enough, Michael." But her granddaughter, Emma, joined in. "He's not even qualified for that job. What kind of experience does he have?" Stacking boxes in a warehouse, Darrell's hands tightened in his lap, but he said nothing. Geraldine stood. "Experience doesn't always come with a degree, Emma. Sometimes it comes from surviving things you can't even imagine." Michael scoffed. "You're making a fool of yourself, Mother." She took a breath, her voice steady. "Then let me be a fool, because Darrell has shown me more loyalty, more integrity, and more compassion than either of you have in the last year." Emma rolled her eyes. "Are you rewriting your will now too?" Geraldine met her gaze without blinking. "I already did." The room fell silent. Darrell looked at her, stunned. She continued, "I've named Darrell as a trustee of the foundation, and yes, I've made provisions for him in my estate. Because I trust him. Because he reminds me of the values this family was built on before money made all of you forget." Michael pushed back his chair. "This is madness." Emma stood too. "You're being manipulated, Grandma." Geraldine looked around the table, at her family, at their sharp tongues and cold hearts. "No. I'm finally seeing clearly." That night, after the guests had left, and the house grew quiet, Darrell stood near the garden, unsure if he should stay or go. Geraldine joined him outside, wrapped in a shawl, the night air crisp. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be," he replied. "I've heard worse." She looked at him. "They're going to try something. I can feel it. They can't stand the idea that I'm giving something to someone who actually deserves it." Darrell nodded. "Then I'll be ready." She touched his arm gently. "No, we will." But deep inside, Darrell knew, love and trust weren't enough for people like Michael and Emma. They had power. They had lawyers. They had patience, sharpened by greed. And now, they had a target. Him. What happened next would unfold like a nightmare Darrell could never wake from. It was a rainy Thursday morning when the police came. Two officers in plain clothes entered the foundation's main office just after 9 a.m. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. The way they moved, calm, certain, sent a chill through the building. Darrell was reviewing youth outreach reports when they walked in. "Are you Darrell Coleman?" "Yes, that's me." "What's going on?" "We need you to come with us for questioning. There's been an allegation of financial misconduct." A few staff members looked up, frozen mid-typing. Someone dropped their coffee. Darrell stood slowly, confused but calm. "There's been a mistake, officers. I can clear this up." They didn't cuff him, not yet. But they walked him out the front door like a guilty man anyway. And of course someone took a photo. By noon, the headline was already viral. "Black employee robs elderly philanthropist of $200,000. At the station the detectives laid it all out in front of him. Forged receipts, altered invoices, digital transfers tied to his name. The paper trail was flawless. Except, it wasn't his. Darrell kept repeating the same words. "I didn't do this. I don't even have access to the main fund. I only coordinate programs. I have to get Geraldine. She'll clear this up." One of the detectives, an older man with a gray mustache, stared at him. "Funny. Her son says she's been confused lately. Says you've been manipulating her." Darrell's mouth went dry. "This isn't real. Someone set this up." Later that day, Geraldine tried to come see him, but Michael had already moved fast, with lawyers, with press statements, with poison. He told everyone his mother was slipping mentally, that she had a soft spot for lost causes, that Darrell had wormed his way in just to take what he could.
That evening, news vans surrounded the foundation's entrance. Photos of Daryl in handcuffs flashed across the screens. Clips of Geraldine walking beside him were edited to look like evidence of deception. He became a symbol, not of redemption, but of betrayal, of fear, of a narrative that people were too eager to believe. Geraldine fought. She issued a statement defending him. She said the charges were absurd, that Daryl had been nothing but loyal and honest, but it was too late. Her voice was drowned out by louder ones. Commentators said she was delusional. Social media mocked her. Conspiracy theories flew that Daryl had seduced her, manipulated her, even threatened her. By Friday morning, Daryl had lost everything. The board suspended him indefinitely. Donors pulled out. His face was all over the internet, but not the way he had ever wanted. He sat alone in his apartment, watching the rain against the window, remembering that first moment. The old woman with the broken cart, her soft voice, "You're the first person who noticed me today." And now, the world noticed him too. But not for kindness, not for compassion. For a crime he didn't commit. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there, breathing, waiting, knowing this wasn't the end, but not yet seeing how the next chapter would begin. Today's story is about how one simple act of kindness can ripple through the world in ways we can't imagine. A man helped a stranger in the rain, and that moment changed both their lives forever. Subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and write your thoughts in the comments. For every new subscriber, I'll donate $1 to a charitable cause. Let's turn stories into real-world impact. The world had turned against him, but Geraldine Brooks was not finished yet. The morning of the press conference, no one expected her to show up. Rumors had been swirling that she was sick, that she had been manipulated, that she was too old to understand what was going on. The media had already buried Daryl's name under a mountain of accusations, and most thought it would end there, just another scandal. But when Geraldine walked onto the stage, wearing her pearl earrings and an old navy blue coat, the room went still. No assistants, no lawyers, just her and a small stack of documents in her hand. She didn't waste time. She didn't raise her voice. She looked into the cameras and said one sentence: "This man is my son more than those who carry my name." The room exploded with questions, but she didn't flinch. She stepped aside and let her team, the few still loyal to her, play the security footage. It showed Daryl working late, logging in properly, rejecting unauthorized payments. Then came the bank statements, proving that the accounts used in the fraud had been opened by someone else, by her grandson, in fact. Receipts, signatures, timestamps, all of it pointed away from Daryl. All of it pointed to the people who had called him a thief. She ended the conference with a simple sentence: "You judged him because of how he looks, but he is the only one who saw me, really saw me, when I was invisible." The crowd was stunned. Some tried to spin it. Others stayed silent. But that evening, as the truth began to surface, Geraldine collapsed in her study. Her heart, already weakened by age and stress, simply gave up. She was taken to the hospital, unconscious. Daryl waited by her door for 2 nights. He held her hand, whispering stories from the foundation, from their quiet lunches, from that day in the rain. She never woke up. 2 weeks later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was grand, crowded with people who once ignored her, but Daryl didn't speak. He stood at the back, silent, unsure of what came next, until her lawyer approached him after the burial. "She left something for you." He handed Daryl a sealed envelope. Inside was her final will and testament. In it she left him the Lexus, yes, but also something far greater. She named Daryl the official director of the Brooks Foundation, not interim, not acting, permanent. It was her final move. A declaration of faith, of trust, of love. The family erupted. Michael threatened to sue. The granddaughter screamed at reporters. They filed legal motions, tried to block the transfer, claimed Geraldine had been manipulated. But the documents were solid, witnessed, notarized. Reviewed by independent counsel months before her death, the court upheld her wishes, and so, Darrell, the man once kicked out of a grocery store for helping a stranger, now sat behind the same oak desk where Geraldine had once written checks that fed entire communities. He didn't celebrate, he didn't boast, he went back to work. He expanded the youth programs, doubled the food drives, started a scholarship in her name, and another for kids like him, who had been overlooked for far too long. And when asked, years later, how it all began, he would always give the same answer. It started in the rain, with a broken cart, a heavy bag, and a choice not to walk past someone who looked invisible.